the part about that chapter, which was so hard that she never told me, is that I had basically died. I didn't know that. They had ordered the wrong blood transfusion, and so they pumped it in, and then they...
This is from the surgery.
From the surgery. And so they had... My dad's description was basically my chest and my back went to about this far between sternum and back, because I'd stopped breathing, and they told my mom and stuff, call your priest, it's over, call your family.
The thing that haunts me about your book is the line, your son's going to be a retard.
Mm-hmm. My first thought was, oh, is my son going to be born without soft spots? Because even in 2011, I had no idea. I'd never heard the word craniosynostosis before.
I remember standing in line in the grocery store, and a guy looked at me. I had my head shaved, and he looked at my head, and he's like, oh man, you had brain surgery. Why don't you go ahead of me?
You know what? I should just shave again. I should just be so proud of it. This is me. This is my skull.
No, at some point we're going to feel each other's heads.
Yeah, we're going to shave today.
Yeah. But we're also going to just feel.
Yes.
That's the only way I can explain it to people.
Just because we can do this remodeling.
Yeah.
Should we? And it kind of blows your mind. They really opened up our skulls.
Yeah.
When we were babies, and they took out some skull.
Yeah.
Put in
just
some.
Took out some skull.
Hey. Put in some alien kind of.
Something that dissolves.
Something that dissolves. And obviously makes us bald and short. We were born with thick skulls.
Yeah, it's true. In more than one way.
I know,
that's the truth. Yeah.
I mean, I was born with way too much bone in my skull, and we laugh, and I like to laugh about it. Mainly because for those moms, I'm sorry for being emotional. And I'm like, oh, you're kidding me, right?
Yeah.
And then I handed her a bottle of wine. And
there you go. Yes. Yeah.
We should probably see what is craniosynostosis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Confronting authors with real questions about the writing process, the difficult and disheartening publishing industry, and why anyone would choose to torture themselves in the world of writing, this is the Literally Podcast, with your host, writer, runner, and the literary voice of Ogden, Utah, Kase Johnstun. Exposing literature, the authors, the business, the process. The Literally Podcast.
This is Kase Johnstun. This is the Literally Podcast. We're podcasting here from my home in Ogden, Utah. Today, I'm the guest, and it's going to be, the show is going to be hosted by Trevor Baierl. Did I get it right?
You got it right.
Baierl. Trevor is a producer. He's flown from Montana, where he's currently working on a film for the Discovery Channel, correct?
Yeah, it's a new series that we should have a title any day now.
And so he came specifically just to talk about Beyond the Group, talk about craniosynostosis, really. Trevor, like me, was born 71 or 71. With craniosynostosis, and we talk about this later, but both of us had corrections. We had the same correction for sagittal synostosis, with probably fontanelle openings for posterior and anterior fontanelle openings, as well as craniectomy. There we go.
That's the one phrase I know.
Sagittal craniectomy, which these words is
sounds personal.
Yes.
Yes.
I was telling Trevor right when we got here that a lot of these things were just second nature for me to talk about while writing the book and researching the book, but now they don't come off the tongue as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Trevor.
What I can do is a shout out to another podcast, the Jay and Tony Show. Some mentors of mine, they talk about reality TV on theirs, but what they're famous for is sitting in the same room and instant messaging each other during meetings. And either cracking jokes or talking smack on whoever's in the room, and you see them hiding behind their computers. So that was my first thought.
So
when
that's
I got
what they're
here.
doing.
Jay and Tony, I'm looking at you. That's one podcast that I do listen to a lot because it's fun to, listen to people talk about what you know.
Yeah.
And speaking of what
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Wow. That was a pretty good transition.
It was good.
I didn't even plan that one. So I'm going to throw up the book, and hopefully it looks good, because Craniosynostosis, I have trouble even saying that still, and a lot of the terminology. But, as we were saying, what brought me to this point is I did a documentary about CJD because it affected my family, and that's a rare disease. Craniosynostosis is much more common disease, but still, my entire life, I never met anyone near my age that went through it.
Me neither.
And after doing the CJD stuff, and realizing how there's not much out there about that, I started looking into this and couldn't find much. I found one book, and this book honestly changed my life.
Oh, that's amazing to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's true, because I was talking about this earlier, that, everybody has experience in their life that kind of affects them, and anxieties and nervousness of something about themselves, some experience or whatever. And for me, there's just been this thing about my head, the shape, the scar, the things, obviously I don't remember the surgery. I was 13 months old. Don't know anything about it. There's very few pictures of me in that time frame even.
Yeah.
So to find a book and read it and see somebody that completely understands the feeling that I have. And I was, this is the truth, is like every day you get up and, you take a shower and you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and you think about my head. I think about my head
every day.
Yeah. And could be seconds, could be day, could be hours, could be minutes, could be whatever. If I do it every day, it wouldn't be days, because that would be every day. And, so, so, and it's just one of those, it's a cosmetic thing, but it's not. It's, it's ingrained in the way you are. So I'll ask you the first question. What made you write the book?
Well, first, thanks. Hearing that is huge to me, because this isn't a book that's going to be a bestseller. It's not a book that's going to hit Random House and go crazy. It's a book that if there's anything that I can get from it, it's exactly what you said, that maybe you felt less alone with this. So that's just that thank you, so much. It's something that took a lot out of me. To get to your question, why? Well, because we had gotten pregnant in 2011, and my biggest fear was that
you and Brandon got pregnant.
I was going to say, wait.
Well, wait till you read the sequel. My wife and I had gotten pregnant in 2011, and my first thought was, oh, is my son going to be born without soft spots? Because even in 2011, I had no idea. I'd never heard the word craniosynostosis before 2011. And so I started to dig for research to see, well, what is this? And through my research, I found the terminology that we were told, you have no soft spots. For my whole life, you were born without soft spots. So they had to and the funny thing about it is there was folklore about my head, within the family, because it was the weirdest stuff they would say. They would say things like, you were born without soft spots, and they had to take bone out and then put metal in to keep it from. That's not true, or they had to put things, but that's what. I think for a long time I heard, well, they put a metal plate in to keep it like this, and then it dissolved, and that's the story I heard. And I was thinking to myself, what happens when a metal plate dissolves in your head? It's this is really strange.
They told me what I had heard was it was some sort of plastic that would dissolve.
And I never found that in my research.
Okay.
About a dissolving plastic, because they told me the same thing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to find out. Not even telling my wife how scared I was that he might have it too. I started to do research, but I fell in the same category as you did, in the sense that there were medical texts, And then there were like strict memoirs that were they were good memoirs. And of course there's the Jorge Posada memoir. I don't know if you've read it. It's how do I say this? It's fluffy.
Oh, wow.
It's very fluffy. And it wouldn't give people much if they were looking for real information.
I would say that's kind of how I've dealt with it in my life, is the fluff side. You know, when I talk to people about it, or they ask me, you know, I make up a cute story. Yeah. One of my go-tos has always been, I got in a bar fight, or I took an axe to the head, and you know, and you make up something goofy just to like, because you don't really want to talk about it, and not even really understanding what happened. Yeah,
like I said, up until 2011, I mean, I was probably 34, 35, and I was just scared, like what? And there's a moment in the book where I talk about that with the ultrasound, like, lady, will you show us the head, and you can't even see if it's fused in an ultrasound, but I didn't even know that at that time when we were going through that I thought, show us the head, the heart's great, I'm glad the heart's beating, but does he have a fused suture, which even then was still new information for me. And so then I started to do more research, finding there isn't a book that merges research and sutural history and surgical history with memoir from someone our age. Like you said, they were always from moms, which are great because moms, they do it all. And if there's anything in this book, it's that these moms they're warriors. You know, they will fight for their kids, and they fight insurance companies and family members who tell them don't open their head because you can just get a helmet, and you're like, no, you can't, that doesn't work at all. They put a lot of guilt on these moms for letting their kids go under the knife. And God, you know, like our moms, I think about it a lot, our moms were brave. This is 71 and 75. Yeah. And they're like, oh yeah, is this the best? Okay, go. Take them. And I have to always thank my mom and dad for saying, yes, we'll do that. So that's how I got started. I started researching, and then I thought, you know, I could write this book. And I think this would be a good book for people like us. Like you said, I don't know anybody my age, and they're out there. You know, there's 1 in 15, they're saying that 1 in 15 to 1,700 kids, and they're out there. We just don't talk about it. It's one of those things you never really talked about. And when my book came out, a lot of my friends said, oh, I thought you got your scars because they had to use the clamps to pull you out. And I was like,
right?
I was like, I've told you that. Yeah,
exactly.
Like, you know, like,
man, what they do with those clamps then? Like,
I know. And so I felt, you know, getting started, I felt like we need a book. We need a book that's in the middle. And we need a lot of different stories. And so it wasn't just my story. I went and interviewed 11, 12 different families. Most of them made it into the book, and it was a story about what happened. And that's the thing is you know this in your line of work, that you think something's gonna be some way, and it never turns out that way. I thought every story I was nervous that every story was gonna be diagnosis, fear, surgery, recovery, happiness. And not one mirrored that. So that's how I got started. I was thinking that we needed a book like this for other families to go, it's not just us, and it's not this fluffy memoir of these two famous people, and they were upset because their son was different. And that's kind of, you know, what that other book was about. And so
yeah. No, that's exactly it. And now that, you know, what I want to do with you is sort of take this to the next level, and you know, if we can get a doc out of this thing so that people can watch it, because I found that helps. You know, it's people read, but they watch YouTube a lot.
They do.
So
they watch,
you know, and then it can get them to get the deeper information too, which and the thing that haunts me about your book is the line, your son's going to be a retard. I didn't get that in my experience, as far as I know. I don't know, my parents might have never told me or blocked it out, but that is the thing. And going through it, I understand that, because I know if you don't get the surgery, things can happen. And this is where I crack the beer, because this is where it gets crazy.
We're in,
you know.
And I think, you know, we have love of beer. That's a good thing.
Yes. So I want you to just kind of walk me through that emotionally. Like, what that means, because obviously you don't know when the time that it happened, but when did you first learn about that, and what was that?
Yeah, that was the hardest part about writing this book. I mean, you nailed it, because my mom had put things away. She'd put them so far away. There's stuff in that first chapter about my story as a baby I'd never heard, and so I was 38 years old when she finally told me. And it was the last interview of the book. I was done. It was December. The publisher wanted it in January. I was done with everything else, all my research, everything. I still hadn't interviewed my mom because I knew it was going to be really, really hard.
Yeah, you just put that off as long as you
can.
As
long as because I knew I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want to take her back there because I knew that there were things she had never told me. I had actually heard the thing about the nurse saying that about your son is going to be she'd actually leaked that out while I was growing up, just because it was her way of saying, it was her way of I think it was her way of just kind of putting it all together and saying, well, we made it through, and everything's fine, and so on and so forth. And the part about that chapter, which was so hard that she never told me, is that I had basically died. I didn't know that. They had ordered the wrong blood transfusion, and so they pumped it in, and then they.
This is from the surgery.
From the surgery, and so they had. My dad's description was basically my chest and my back went to about this far between sternum and back, because I'd stopped breathing, and they told my mom and stuff, call your priest, it's over, call your family. And in the book, she tells me these things, and I've never heard this. I've heard about the soft spots, I've heard about what the nurse said, and I'd never heard that. She said, I just found myself outside. It was the winter, and I was standing, and it was a snowstorm outside, and she's like, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what was going on. She's like, one of those moments I felt like I was hanging above myself. And my mom is not that way. My mom's not someone who says, out of body experiences. Right. She's very grounded. Right. She's not. And she said, but at that moment, and that I knew there's something there. And she broke down during the interview. And of course, she turns to me and says, I'm sorry, I'm so emotional, And I'm like, gosh. You're kidding me, Mom, right? You're amazing, you're so strong, you know? And I'm sorry for being emotional. And I'm like, oh, you're kidding me, right?
Yeah.
And then I handed her a bottle of wine. And
there you go. Yes. Yeah.
But with the you're going to be a retard stuff. First off, that language, luckily we've gotten to a place with that, where that language is at least disappearing within our culture. Hopefully would disappear more in our culture. But how harsh, how harsh is that for a nurse to look at a newborn and say, just coldly, there's something wrong with him. And and that was 1975, but there are other people in the book, other moms, nurses would say the same thing to him, just coldly say, your son's, like the Howards in there. Sadly, they lost their son, but it wasn't because of craniosynostosis. It was because of a lung sickness. She said the same thing to her. A nurse said the same thing to her, like, that's weird, And it's like, this is your kid.
Yeah. Well, you're already so worried about the birth itself.
Oh, sure.
And concerned about whatever problems or complications. You kind of want to, if there is something wrong, you don't want to be so negative in the first, give some positivity, some reassurance, but
be a professional.
Exactly.
Say, I'm going to, the heart rate's good, the breathing's good, I'm going to grab the doctor.
Yeah.
Something really simple like that. And so, I knew that interview was coming, and that was the hardest one. And she's just so funny. She's just like, I'm so sorry. Am I upsetting you to me? And I'm like, no, Mom, I mean, this is rough. I'm glad I didn't die. I'm really glad.
Yeah.
And that was something that she had never told me. And now I know why. And honestly, I think, and we didn't talk about it much before this, and she knew that interview was coming the whole book, and I asked her blessing and everything.
Yeah.
But I think we've talked more about this since.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would do interviews all over the country. And we did one in Washington, and I went and visited a mom there, and I came back, and my mom, and I was just over a really bad Italian dinner. I mean, it was one of those ones where the cheese is curdling, and it's just like, I was telling her about their story and how they had a rough go.
Yeah.
And my mom just like broke down and she's like, I don't know if I can hear these things. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Because me as a journalist, as a producer, as these things that we do, we hear all these stories and we're storytellers with what our professions are. And so we're good at just kind of almost compartmentalizing it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't thinking, I was not being sensitive to the fact that my mom had gone through all this. And I was just saying, oh, well, you know, this kid, they did this to his head and da-da-da-da. And my mom's sitting there going,
yeah.
and you know, it's triggering these things that, because like you said at the beginning, we don't remember the surgery, you know, it's come and gone. That chapter was hard to write. It was hard to do.
Yeah.
It was the hardest.
Yeah.
So
thanks for doing it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for,
Apparently we've turned into a drinking podcast.
It's tradition.
Per normal, yeah.
Okay. All right. Good.
Never mind the noon light outside. It's,
yeah. Well, we're into some deep stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, I mean, there's so much to talk about with what you gave me from this book. I guess let's go with some of the history of the surgery, since we're just kind of talking about that. Like, that was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Like, how the hell did you do that research and find out like prehistoric skulls and the craziness? Like, oh my God.
I was lucky. While I was doing the most of the research for this, I was teaching at Kansas State, and so I had access to, like, I currently teach online for colleges, but their access to like medical journals and databases vary based on how much they pay. And so one of the colleges I work for now, they just teach freshmen and sophomores, and so they only have a certain amount of things that you can get into. But Kansas State being a large university with all of these different majors who need this pre-med and all that stuff, I got access to basically every medical journal, anthropological journal, historical journal that I needed. And if it wasn't there, you know, I could just order it and then I could just do the research. And so I was able to access stuff that I would like. The sad part is most people can't do it. Like, unless you're in college or you're at the university, you can't access all these things. Unless I give you my password, which I'll happily do.
There's always a workaround. Sneak the password.
So I was able to, to get into all of these anthropological journals, these medical journals, I was able to find the coolest things like the Hippocratic original oath, and to find like the books, the drawings from way back then, what they were. I mean, they were drawing skulls in these books thousands, years ago, and we've been messing with our sutures since we've been on the planet. I mean, you go to these ruins and they have, drawings of skulls that are, elongated. And the only way they were doing that stuff was by binding and changing and working with sutures, and a lot of those people with those elongated skulls, they probably had severe mental disabilities, and they, but it was a way of honoring gods, and it was a way of doing different things. And so as humans, we've known about our skull and the way that it's, how we could shape it since we've been around, and which is crazy. And to me, as a researcher, I was in heaven for this part of the book. I mean, I was, I could see like, oh my gosh, look at this. And you find something, especially like with the first time they tried to correct the birth defect. Like, wow, that was like, now it's nearly 150 years ago that they tried to open a baby's skull. And the first one was in France and the second one was in San Francisco. And that came like this little teeny excerpt from a medical journal where the doctor submitted what happened.
Yeah.
And it was like this big. And he said, this woman just from the Inland Empire kept writing me saying, please release my son's brain. He's dying from this. And this was like in the 1880s, and I'd have to look at the book for the exact date, but and again,
we'll let people read, and then they
can read it. Yeah, find out that date. But it goes back to the same thing that these moms, they fight for their kids. And she just said, I don't care. You've got to open my son's skull. And this was just a random mom in the 1800s in California saying do this, and he finally did, and the boy died. So that's, I mean, it was a little extra, and it was like, microfiche, and then, but that was cool. The research part, I learned so much about what they'd been doing for so long. That I loved that. Now interviewing the families and then writing about them, that's why I'm like, I'll never do a book like this again in my entire life,
But let's do a documentary about it.
But hey, that's fine, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I remember reading that story, and it just was fascinating about going back in the history. Mm-hmm. I feel like now that Jesse's in the middle of the Facebook, we can say, "Hi, Jesse. Thanks for helping us out here."
Thanks, Jesse. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
There's a little hole there for you too if you want one.
How rude of us.
I know, really.
Remember, I'm not here.
Exactly.
She's doing real work,
So actually, you brought up a couple of things that I mean, I'm gonna jump around so much because my brain's just scattered from all this. But
we had skull surgery when you were little.
Good excuse, right? And you have to joke about it. But one of the terms is a birth defect, and I don't think I in my life ever referred to it as that or heard anybody do that, and never really thought of it that way, which I guess is sort of the fluff side of it, like. It's a birth defect, obviously by definition. But tell me, kind of like, give me some details about what it is and how it happens, and some of the stats, I guess, would be a good way. So
again, for the exact numbers, you're gonna have to look at
check out.
Yeah, but as for summary. The nice part about it is that it does follow the different pathologies of other birth defects. So there's going to be a percentage that's going to be hereditary, of course, and there's a genetic, because the larger percentage of craniosynostosis is male, and the largest of those male, and the largest percentage of a closed suture. And for anybody who doesn't know this is. We should probably see what is craniosynostosis.
Yeah.
It's the early closure of any of your cranial sutures. And with the early closure, and this is one of the things that I found out really early on that I didn't know, but the brain dictates the skull.
Yeah.
And I always thought the skull probably dictated the shape of the brain, but it's the opposite. The brain, as it grows, dictates the shape of the skull and your head and so on and so forth. So if one of those cranial sutures is closed, and this is, doctors could say this a lot better, and there's a lot of points in the book where I say, I'm not a doctor, I'm just a researcher.
Yep.
Wherever that suture is closed, eventually, well, first off, the brain's going to compensate in the opposite direction, so it's going to push outward or inward, depending on where the suture is. But eventually it's going to get through that thin layer of skull, and it's going to hit that hard skull, or there's going to be a lot of pressure between them. Even if it doesn't hit, there's going to be pressure, and that pressure on the brain, wherever that suture is located, is obviously going to affect that part of the brain's development. Like I said, doctors can explain it better, but for this, it works really well that way. And so, what was the first question? That we needed that.
Yeah,
though,
no,
right?
exactly.
That's kind of like what was the original question?
It was kind of getting in the stats and kind of defining it.
Yeah. So I mean, like with most birth defects, from what I found through the research, is there's going to be a disbursement of why. There's going to be now they've found the gene for craniosynostosis now, which is a similar gene to the new show Wonder, or the new book Wonder.
Absolutely,
right,
you turned me on to that.
Yeah, so that's malleofacial craniosynostosis. So it's the same genetic family, from what I understand about genes. I'm not a genealogist,
right?
Not a genealogist, but what's the real genealogists?
I'm not a genealogist
aren't
either.
Genealogists the one that just like they
I'm just a TV producer. I don't know.
Genealogists are just like find your family.
Yeah.
A geneticist.
Geneticist. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So there's a portion of children who are going to have the gene.
Yeah.
There's a portion that are going to, it's environmental. So the twins. Boy twins a lot of times have it because the womb is too small, and so they get something neurologically telling them close the skull because there's not enough room.
Yeah.
Or just kind of just by force. But it's really interesting that it really is large percentage boys. You know, it's going to be boys, and it's going to be sagittal like us.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be sagittal and it's going to be boys. And that's the most common craniosynostosis that there is. And so I wanted to spend quite a bit of time in the book about boys with sagittal, because that's readership wise. I think a lot of people will probably say, you know, and like with this documentary, like we probably need to talk about sagittal quite a bit, sagittal synostosis, because that's the most common, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's the percentages of basically how the birth defect works. The birth defect is a really interesting word. It is. It's just basically congenital birth defect, meaning born, you know, born with it, and happened before birth. Some happen slightly after or keep closing, but that's the gist of it. From what I understand, for the best of my knowledge, I'm not a doctor.
Yeah. No, I mean,
yeah,
we speak from knowledge, but not the same medical knowledge that a doctor would. I mean, we have a personal experience, and obviously you did a lot of research.
And a lot of doctors in the book doing what they do well. And
yeah.
So, I mean, if you want that voice, it's there.
Yeah.
You know, and we could probably, you know, after the short, you know, when we go big, we get some of those doctors.
You promised me that.
Oh yeah, that's I know. Dr. Staffenberg in New York at NYU.
Yeah,
he's amazing. We're coming for you. Yeah, he is a good guy.
Yeah, and
it's really funny that we bring that up, because what I didn't know when I wrote the book, and I found out 2 years later from an MRI, is that I also have Chiari malformation, which is a brain tonsil, basically. So part of my brain has been pushed down into my spine, and a lot of cranial kids have that as well. And for the research, I'm so glad that I didn't know that.
Right.
Because this book nearly killed me anyways, with research and families and stuff. That would have opened up a whole new can of worms.
You could have spiraled off.
I know. Yeah. And there are kids in here with Chiari malformation. And basically, like I wrote Dr. Staffenberg. I'm like, what do you think about this? And he's like, you need to get it you need to be monitored, because if your brain gets too big in that spine, and then if the fluid's not going into if it starts to cut off the fluid,
right,
you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And there's a lot.
Close
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So.
Wait, so is your brain still grow
no,
in your 40s?
No, okay. It's just they think. And I have not done a lot of research on Chiari, but there was pressure originally when the brain was developed, and it created a tonsil that got pushed down into here. Lots of kids have it. Lots of cranial kids have that Chiari malformation, because there's.
I gotta look into it and
you
see whether or not I don't know.
You don't need anything else, Trevor.
Trust me, I've had plenty of MRIs at this point. So everything.
That's good. That's good. So it's. Dr. Staffenberg basically said if you're asymptomatic at 42, you're probably fine. Yeah. But I've had since then people reach out to me, and their kids are not asymptomatic. And they have to get the brain cut off at that point. Or trimmed down. Wow. Right? I know. It's like...
It's a good thing we only use like 10% of our brain, so there's some spare parts,
at least for
right?
thought, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'm simplifying there a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, we don't always have to talk about the book either. So
I
don't.
Well, this is the fascinating stuff. And honestly, the book is our lives. Mm-hmm. So I'm not even thinking about it as the book. I'm thinking about it as like us talking about what we've gone through and that sort of thing. Because it kind of goes to the issues that you could have if we didn't have the surgery. Yeah. And what I used to think about is, I know certainly maybe a half generation, certainly a full generation before us, if you had mental problems, they'd just stick you in a home, a sanitarium, whatever. And for some reason, I've always been fascinated by that thought of, being just sent to a place like that. And it's really what I thought if my parents elected not to have the surgery, that I would have gone off to something. I don't know. It might have changed, certainly would change my quality of life, but the length, maybe, I don't know all the things that could have gone wrong with development. And like you said, it depends on where the pressure on the brain is and where it can grow. But I mean, is that did you think about things like that?
Oh yeah, all the time. And it's really funny. Like I think it gets like you were saying at the beginning. It's like every day I think about this, and for every day I've thought about this, especially in high school when I started to lose my hair. And you're like, oh. I've always thought weird things, and it's maybe not along the same lines, but just something else that's in your brain, like, well, I was joking earlier about, something dissolving into my brain. Like that can't be okay.
Right.
And, but I always think like, do other people feel these weird headaches or hollowness at times? And I don't know if you've felt that, like a weird hollowness feeling in your skull, and it might be normal, right, for everybody to feel that way. But, if there's anything different, I'm like, maybe that's craniosynostosis, or something of it. And it's ingrained in me to think about it, and I don't know if you have this, like with the scar, like I still get like, because of all scars, you get weird feelings. I mean, it's a rawness and it's a tingle at times. And you're like, oh no. I mean, I remember in college, I was like, I think I'm going to die. I've got these weird tinglies going on up here and I don't know what's happening. And then realized later that it's probably just, maybe everybody has those things, but it's
well, it's hard to tell because you can't. This is the thing that I always I think about when I go to the doctor or whatever, and they ask you how you're feeling or are there any changes, and it's like, well, I don't know because I don't know what other people feel. I only know what I feel, and so it's hard to make those comparisons. And so again, this is why it's like, oh wow, somebody who has some things that are similar. What do you feel? Is it like this or and that's it's fascinating that we could find each other and you could write the book because we are here about the book.
No, we're here about the documentary.
I have a question. You both mentioned a little bit of anxiety. I also suffer from anxiety. I couldn't imagine having sensations in the head, in the brain, because anything little weird that happens, it sets my anxiety off. And so being able to find each other and say, hey, do you feel this or do you feel that? That I think is going to help.
Yeah.
Any weird thing that happens,
Absolutely. Yeah. Because now we can actually call each other now that we can talk.
Yeah, now that Trevor will talk to me.
Right, exactly.
That's a good thing. Yeah, I agree. And like Brandon and I have very, very bad claustrophobia, and part of me wonders if it's something. Has always wondered if it's something that maybe being enclosed, maybe something with, I don't know, and I know a lot of people have claustrophobia. It's part of who we are, but I have extreme anxiety with it. And my thought is always, well, maybe it's connected, and
right. Well, it could be from getting a surgery that young,
could be
and things
trauma
like that.
Because, that trauma sits in your body.
Yeah.
It really does. Even if we don't remember, we had our skulls opened up.
Exactly.
Bone taken out.
Yeah.
And like you said, we don't have photos. Like before my surgery, I think we've got I found 4, and my mom's always had photos, but before my surgery, I found 4, and then one at the after, which was just basically my head wrapped.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why aren't there more photos? There's a story that my mom's like, well, yeah, I was really mad at your uncle for a really long time. I said, why? Well, it's because like before your surgery, he's like, yeah, kid's head looks like a football, and she's like, I think my mom doesn't cuss.
Yeah.
But she's probably like, F you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Have some sensitivity.
Right.
When you have a kid. And,
yeah. Well, and then he wasn't saying like, oh boy, you should check that out. Your son's head looks like a football. It's like it's
Yeah. Hey, football head.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's
I mean, I still get that kind of stuff, like weird things of like, pointing it out, and man, that just goes right to my insecurity.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I mean, I wear a hat basically every day.
Yeah.
And I've grown my hair out for my trip to Montana that I'm doing, but here's it is. This is the one of the great things that I found in your book, and this is a shared experience of, as a guy, male pattern baldness, you start to, as it comes on, you start to worry about it. I spent a lot of money. I did Propecia. I did this Regenics stuff.
Yeah.
I would go to these people and they'd massage oils in my head and figuring out every single way, and like the certainly the thought of hair transplant surgery and things like that, and just it was tough decisions to try to think about what can I do to stave off this appearing. And obviously you made a decision. And
yeah, my parents and I did when I was 18, started to lose my hair, and we went and got hair transplants. And since it's really funny now because it's all here, and I've gone and gotten like the electrolysis to get rid of it now. I've gone in and had like to get it off, because it got to a point when I was writing the book, when I was like you, I was wearing a hat every day for my 30s, and it's really funny. We did it, and I know my parents, they did it for one reason. It was to protect me and to hopefully, so that I could have this life, and that's another thing, is like, I think about that every single day, like, is that part of you? What is this? How does it define you? So on and so forth. And it's hard. It doesn't go away. And, in the book, I'm like, okay, I'm fine with it. The book ends with, I'm fine with it. Shave my head. I'm keeping my head shaved forever.
Yeah.
And you can see me now, my head's not shaved anymore, And, well, because with the book, with writing, you got to make it feel full. And at the moment I did, I was being completely authentic with myself.
Yeah.
I've got a wonderful wife, and my son loves me, and, and all these things. I think she loves me too. My wife loves me too. But it's like, I'm still at that point I thought, I got some I'm writing this book. I'm figuring it out. I have some.
Well, it's cathartic, I'm sure. Yeah.
And I have some resolution. But now I'm Propecia.
Yeah.
Rogaine.
Yep.
Getting this part lasered so it doesn't look weird.
Yeah.
Every day, it doesn't go away. And if people can read the book or listen to this and say, okay, well, he did for a while, well, then I think maybe that's as good as it gets. That, for a while I felt a lot of peace.
Yeah.
But that's life, If this was if this were a novel, we'd be just, I'd be like highlighting my scars, hey, look, people.
Yeah.
But it's not a novel. And, and that's what I've gone through a lot, is that, we did this when I was 18. My parents had the best of intentions. And then I regretted it forever. And then I was ashamed about it. And then now I'm like, huh? It kind of helps, it's kind of helped at least cover things up, and to be completely honest with myself. And, and this is, like I said, it's like, this is an ongoing thing. Like today, to wake up today and I'm like, you know what, I should just shave again. I should just be so proud of it. This is me. This is my skull. But then the next day I'm like, you know what, Propecia, and but it sits on you, and I'm, in the book I talked about the transplant, and and even talking about it now, I'm like, who's listening? It's it eats at me, but at the same time, then I'll walk away and I'll be like, you know what, part of me wants to get to that point where it's always like, I don't care.
Yeah.
This is me.
Yeah.
My wife's there,
right.
She doesn't care. When can I get there? And that's I don't know if I will.
Right. Yeah. No. Every time I think
sense?
I am, I there's that day I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, because I have you can look. I've been shaving my head now for years, but that first time was just daunting, and I used to mess with my hair, all kinds of crazy stuff. I had it dyed every color and spiky and all the stuff, and then I do facial hair once I was able to grow it in my late 30s or what. No, it took a while, but yeah, like well, it's in our culture of like your hair can be sort of a define you a little bit, your style and things like that, and let's be honest, nobody wants to be bald.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't want to be bald with, a malformed head.
Yeah.
A scar and,
Yeah.
And, but I've heard, I've had people say, oh, it's a beautiful scar and, things like that. And it's like, it sounds nice, but I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
I know it's part of me.
Yeah.
you know, and I've gotten to a much better spot with it, but I'm not comfortable really with it.
Yeah.
I can accept it most days, but you know, it's a difficult thing. And I have one story that I'll share, and you probably have some things like this, but I remember standing in line in the grocery store, and a guy looked at me. I had my head shaved, and he looked at my head, and he's like, "Oh man, you had brain surgery. Why don't you go ahead of me?" And I'm like, wow, you know, because again, this was a surgery that happened. I have no recollection of it. It, you know, physically hasn't had a big impact on my life. But somebody looked at me and was like, "Oh my gosh, you should go ahead of me in line at the grocery store of all places." Like, and I felt bad.
Yeah.
You know, because I know that, you know, there are people that are going through things.
That's,
you know, and I don't want to put myself in the same shoes as these people, you know. But I guess some people can look at me in the same way, and it's just,
it's weird.
Yeah.
And you touched on something with me too. It's like, you know, I have scars. Some people, and then I feel really selfish, you know, like people have lost legs and arms, and they, you know, and they, like, if you look at this young boy on Like with Wonder, even though it's a novel,
right?
Or if you look at some of these people with craniosynostosis who've gone, I mean, we're lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, we had one surgery in the 70s. Things seem to be going okay, you know?
Right? Yeah. We're here having beers together.
Right, I know. And
you got a nice house, you know.
You know, and that's the thing. We're, even within the craniosynostosis world, we're pretty lucky. You know, we really are. And that lends into a whole other conversation about surgical repair and what is absolutely what's necessary, and where doctors are kind of fighting with each other right now, but what's necessary.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that in a bit. But, and then at the same time, I feel like, you know, God, get over yourself. You know, people are born without arms, and people are, you know, and even within the craniosynostosis world, people's, you know, they have a lot larger, more significant birth defect than me. And so then you battle this thing of like, stop being so selfish. You're pretty healthy overall.
Yeah.
You know, you've got these things, and that's that battle, you know, and there will be people that probably look at this and say, you're pretty shallow, Kase. You know, you are. If you're that stressed about that. And that's that dynamic you get with something like this. But and at the same time, I think it's like you said, it's like, it's with you every day. Yeah. It's with you every day. And, you know, I've made decisions in my life, and for the most part, you know, I'm okay. You know, I don't know. You know, I wish I could give you you know, I'm good. Yeah. Nah, you know, it's like, and it's all in your head. Well, I mean, I know. Yeah, that came out. I didn't mean to do it, but it really, the
puns are free here.
But it does bring up a really interesting point about where the medical community is on this. You know, now, because there's two different types of repair, basically, these days. One is the CVR, which is the cranial vault reconstruction. And this is serious stuff. I mean,
that was fascinating. I didn't know that that's something they do now.
It's extremely common. They basically, a neurologist will just cut the skull off from here up, pull it off. They'll break up the entire skull, and then they'll form it back to create the sutures.
Yeah. It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
So a plastic surgeon will come in and or craniofacial surgeon will come
in. Actually,
a
jigsaw puzzle is more put together. Yeah, this is just smashed.
It's like
bag of ice on the ground.
I mean, you should see it's real. Well, and then there's lots of different ways they do it. Some will do it like, there's one called the pi method. So it looks like pi, 3.17 whatever, and so they'll have a bone across, and they'll go down.
Yeah, I was thinking cherry or
pumpkin.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's other methods that they use to reshape it. And it's extremely invasive. I mean, you're taking a kid's skull off, you're breaking it up, then you're molding it back together.
Yeah. It's already like a daunting thing to do a surgery on your newborn. Yeah. and now you're going to tell me that you're going to just smash it up.
Yeah, and
what?
And it takes a long time. I mean, that's a lot of blood loss. It's a long time under anesthesia for a baby, basically.
Well, and we're talking basically almost newborns because they're doing these in the first year.
As soon as they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as you can, because it's the older the kid gets, the more that skull hardens, the more invasive, dangerous surgery that is. The earlier they can get with a pliable skull, that's great for doctors, because they can do what they need to. But when it gets hard, that's trouble, and just from my understanding.
You're not a doctor.
I'm not a doctor, but so the question is, but the thing is about the CVR is they shape these kids' heads. God, they look gorgeous. I mean, they basically remodel the skull, and it just grows. And these kids have these perfectly round heads, and so. But a lot of doctors are saying we don't need to do that because, like, you and I had this basic, simple craniectomy. We're kind of like dinosaurs in this thing. Because now the kids with craniosynostosis, if they have the CVR, they've got these beautiful heads. They don't have and they do this cool like zigzag scar. And
which is something that I notice now.
Yeah.
I will see younger people with that. And I'm like, I bet you they had the surgery.
Yep. And what they do is because with male pattern baldness, we keep this hair and we typically keep this like right there. So it zigzags up and it goes right over the top. And it's not like us. That's
exactly.
And then their heads are so nice. Like that's the thing about my head. It's so lumpy. It's like
No, at some point we're gonna feel each other's heads.
Yeah, we're gonna shave today.
But we're also gonna just feel.
Yes.
That's the only way I can explain it to people. Like, because I don't know, maybe you can't see it as much, especially if I have some hair or whatever, and I'm just like, no. Feel my head, and I have a valley, and it's lumpy, and I've taken baseballs to the head and other things too, so I got extra lumps. I got a surfing scar, so I'm cool like that, or not because I took a fin to the back of my head, but so
and the other side is because they can we're just dinosaurs in the sense that the young kids' heads, they look really good, and I'm happy for them. But then the other surgical option is the endoscopic, but you have to wear a helmet for a year, and that's the thing. It's like the endoscopic, it's not nearly as invasive. They basically can go in and put holes and pull skull out, and then they, and so the kids aren't losing that much blood. They're not under for that long. It's basically doing our surgery with an endoscope. Without doing a full thing. So their scars are like this and like this,
For those on the podcast, like this means...
Oh, yeah, like, sorry. There's basically like an inch scar above where your fontanelles would be. So your anterior fontanelle or your posterior fontanelle at the front and the back of your head. And but they have to wear the helmet for a year. But that does the shaping the same way that the CVR does the shaping in surgery. And it's a really simple procedure. Basically, it's this procedure we had, but we didn't get the helmet.
Yeah.
That's the difference, is we didn't get the helmet. Our skulls just kind of did what they
something dissolved in our
something
brains.
Something dissolved in the brain, small children, small mice. But it's like, and so there's like Dr. Walker, who's been doing the surgery since he knew the doctor that did my surgery. And so meeting him was really cool. He basically said, I don't know. I don't think we should be doing these huge surgeries when the smaller surgery does the job. Why should we be putting? And other doctors would say, well, no, because there's, we can shape them and we can do these things. And there's a controversy about it. And within the community still, like, what should we be doing? And which is really interesting because there's been controversy about it forever. Like one thing I found was really cool is there was a Methodist pastor in the early 1900s who was also a doctor, and he actually founded the pediatric part of the American Medical Association.
Sure.
Part's not the right word. Like during that time, they were doing quite a bit, and I don't know what the number is, but quite a bit of surgeries for kids, but a lot of the kids were dying.
That's the thing that hit me, that thinking about our time frame and how lucky we were.
We were lucky. Yeah. And that's what we talk about with our skulls and stuff, but we were real. By the time they got to us, they were pretty darn good at it.
Yeah.
And that's good. And it wasn't, we were 20, 25 years at the point where they were still figuring a lot of stuff out. But he got up in front of the American Medical Association, and being a preacher, he said, just because we can open up these skulls doesn't mean we should until we get it right. And your soul, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the fact of, and if you keep doing it, your souls are going to hell. And it's in the book. The exact quote's in the book.
Yeah.
He's basically saying, until we get it right, we need to stop opening these kids' skulls up because they're dying, you know? And that's the question that goes back to like what Dr. Walker was saying is, just because we can do this remodeling, should we? And then the other part is there's thousands and thousands of kids doing the CVR, getting the CVR every year, and they're doing great. Yeah. So, you know, it's like,
well, you think about the progress from us, you know, to now, and what was right before us. That was, you know, I mean, you really were risking lives, but also, you know, at this point, is it worth the risk? Because like you said, it's a lot of blood loss. It's those things that you take into account, more time under anesthesia, and these are babies. You know, I can see where people think of it as like we're doing these great things, but man, it's a baby. You don't know, they're not in a position like an adult to handle things as well. And I can't even imagine, like, this goes back to our parents, like that thought of, you know, trying to do this. And I have a friend who at some point you'll meet, who had a daughter.
Right.
And so
I'm probably not allowed to talk to him yet either.
We'll see. I don't know. At this point, we're breaking it open.
Yeah. Good.
So so his daughter had sagittal.
Right.
And he was like, you know, searching for answers and like trying to figure stuff out. And, you know, since I do sometimes talk about what happened to me and sometimes not, a mutual friend knew that, or thought, hey, wait, I think that's what Trevor went through. And, you know, and the fact that he's like a good friend of mine and didn't know that he could ask me until he, you know, found out from the other friend, and he reached out to me, and I said, you know, no, you have to do this. Yeah. You know, there's not a choice, you know, but, you know, obviously find the right doctor and, you know, all the things you would normally do, but it's not a choice. And I always think about that with my parents. There wasn't a choice to be made. You got to do it. Yeah. But it's phenomenal, the changes in the surgery that have happened.
Oh, they've gone so far. And that was what was really cool about talking to Dr. Walker, who's been doing these since the late 60s. He said, we've gone this way, we've gone that way. And now after 40 years, I'm thinking we need to go back to the simplest surgery there is. He's like, it worked.
Right.
You know, and then there's amazing doctors who just make these, you know, the kids are healthy, they're doing just fine. And, you know, most of them, that's the thing, is like these days, like the success rate is just 99.3% or something. Yeah. It's a horrible statistic percentage. I just made it up, but it's extremely, like,
you're not a doctor.
Yeah. I have the numbers in the book. Yes. They're in there. At one point I knew them exactly. It's really silly. I say things to people like, you know, if I were to be born with craniosynostosis, I wish I would be born now, you know?
Exactly.
Because, you know, it's like, it's commonplace. Well, and that's the thing though. It's commonplace for, like, I'm lucky to live here in Ogden where there's what are we looking at? 3 million people along the Wasatch Front now. When I was born, 1 million at least along the Wasatch Front. And so these doctors see, and if the numbers are like the birth defect is 15 to 1,700 kids, these pediatricians see that many kids. If you're in rural Kansas, where my wife grew up, in a town of 2,000, the two pediatricians there maybe see 1,700 kids in their entire practice. Yeah, they're gonna miss it. They can still miss it today, and it still happens. And they're still missing it. Not just rural Kansas, but there are still pediatricians that miss it because they haven't seen it. Yeah. And so, you know, I say that I would like to be born now with it. Yeah, I'd like to be born now, 30 miles from Primary Children's, which is one of the best hospitals in the country, in the world.
Yeah, I had mine done at Milwaukee Children's Hospital, which is a really good. Yeah. You know, but yeah, I mean, you've brought it up of like in other countries and things like that. Like, you know, it's like before we had our surgery.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's dangerous. Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting part about it is you going back to like what you're talking about earlier when it comes to like society and culture and how people view you. just because of aesthetics, right? I mean, that's another reason. Like, there's another reason why you got to get it done too, and it's because the social, cultural stigma that you'll have if we didn't get fixed. I mean, we got wonky heads, right? But if we didn't get fixed,
yeah, it'd be much worse.
Oh, it would protrude,
Yeah.
From our skull,
Yeah.
out like this, and that's another part. It's like, God, you got to get over your scars, because just look, if you didn't have it. Looking culturally, and that's what was really cool. Another point to find in the research is we've been dealing like that with people with disabilities or with abnormal growth patterns within their bodies and skulls. Is we found anthropologically they've found that like you can define a culture by how they treat the people with disabilities, and they found that one of the anthropologists found a burial site in Europe where they had buried. So they found somebody with craniosynostosis, and next to him they found somebody with Down syndrome, and next to they found somebody with and so they buried their peoples with disabilities in a different burial spot than the common people in the culture. And then in another place in Europe, they were all buried together, so they could really delve into how did this culture value human life and value differences within the people within their community. And I mean, that's the coolest thing in the world, to find those things in research. That's just the writer in me. Like, that was cool.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it goes back to that psychosocial, cultural disadvantage that somebody has if they look different.
Yeah.
Because we do it. We do it all the time, and it's not fair. I interviewed a man in the book who didn't get corrected, and he's had a really rough life, and he blames it all on the fact that he looks different. And because he had the same situation. He was on a job site, like working in construction, and he wanted to use heavy equipment, and his boss said something to him like, "Oh, we don't let the retards do that," and you're like, and this is 2005 or 2006, just because he looked.
And that was just based on appearance.
Just appearance.
Yeah. It's not like he took a test and they said,
it was
no, you're not.
strictly appearance, and he was brave to talk to me.
Yeah.
His name is changed in the book, and that was my one source that I said, okay,
let's
go. But he's our age,
and he's that's a fascinating thing, of somebody who didn't have the surgery, and it shows that, you could have still had a very normal, functional life. We could have, we don't know what would have happened.
We don't know.
But I feel very fortunate that we did have it, and I don't know where I would be if I didn't have the surgery.
No,
so
I don't know either.
I thank my parents.
I do too.
And so, that brings up sort of the, we still have, my head is sort of elongated, kind of a little egg shape in the whole thing. And so my hats have to stretch a little bit more, and things don't fit this, the normal way and that sort of thing. But what it really came down to, and this was, I think, just awful and shocking, of you got into insurance companies and the idea that it's a cosmetic
that's
surgery
the worst thing. Well, it's
I know,
and that goes somewhere so far, because talk about messing with parents' heads
completely.
Yeah, because it's cosmetic, because they will reshape it to make it look better, so it has to have the cosmetic tag.
Yeah.
And it's elective because it's not life or death. So these doctors, they have to say these words. They have to say it's elective and it's cosmetic, because you actually have to, like, a non-elective surgery is, you get in a car accident and you go into the ER. No one's electing to have that surgery. You need to have that surgery to save your life. If you have to plan a surgery, that's elective. But the terminology itself is like, it's not elective, and it's not it's cosmetic secondarily, but it's necessary. It's a necessary correction. But medically, they have to tell you these things. And so they tell a parent, well, this is an elective cosmetic surgery. And talk about the way you would spin on your own kid. Like, I'm going to have my kid's head taken off, reshaped, and put, just because it's elective, but it's just because it's cosmetic. And so these parents, and it's like they spin. But at the same time, we know there's not a lot of research on people who have not had the correction, but there's a lot of research on what happens if your brain doesn't develop in the right place.
Yeah.
And so they tell them it's elective and cosmetic, and these parents sit there and say, and family members, that's who they fight. Like, well, if it's elective and cosmetic, why would you put your child under that stress?
Right.
And you're like, well, it's because those are terms. That's not actually, it's elective because we have to plan it in September. We're electing to do it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to growth and development, it's not elective. No doctor is going to tell you. I mean, they have to say you have a choice, but any doctor I talked to said, no, like you said, it's got to be corrected. These things, there has to be room in the skull for the kid's brain to grow, and they mess with people with that cosmetic and stuff. And I talked about that a lot. And like, just every time I brought it up, I had to like restate it. This is what they mean by cosmetic.
Yeah.
Because as a parent, like,
Yeah.
I don't want to put my kid under that if it's just because this. But then there's the whole psychosocial part of it too. That's like, would it still be worth it so that the kid doesn't run into that problem on a construction site?
Exactly.
When he's is it still worth it? And I think it probably is, even if you want to consider it that way. I still think it is, for that kid.
Yeah.
And so, and especially with
that's
this day
how
and
our
age,
culture is.
Yeah, this day and age, when they've got it down.
Yeah.
And not like it'd be hard. I can't imagine my son doing it.
Yeah.
I don't even want to think about it.
No, of course.
That's how I got started researching the book, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it comes all the way back to it.
Exactly. Yeah, and my God, if this was the a cosmetic surgery and this is the end result, you'd be like, I want my money back. I mean, come on.
That's the truth, because my head goes like this, like it goes up on one side and then like that, and that's where kind of keep the Rogaine in.
yeah.
But like you said, if this was cosmetic, let's go do it
this
again.
This is not a boob job.
No, it's not.
I mean, this is not.
And that's where it comes back with the transplant. Like, this is something that I did not to improve. It's not something I would have done if I didn't have a crazy head. If I just lost my hair, just like everybody else in my family loses their hair, I just shaved my head. If it, and it's not a big deal. But this is something that was, I feel like it was an extension of that surgery. And that's kind of how I deal with it. Absolutely. It's an extension of that surgery 42 years ago.
But even think about it. Think about how many people and how much money is made through hair transplant and all that stuff for people with normal heads. So...
And this is the battle you have, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. And it's like... Then I go and I get it erased. I don't know.
Well, I mean, again, it's like it's all the steps in the process. That's and dealing with something that happened to you, literally in your first year.
Yeah. 2 months. I was 10 weeks old when they opened me up.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's an extension of that surgery, and I think it's kind of the way that I've dealt with it. And I'm going to keep dealing with it. With that and wine.
Yeah.
But red wine. Oh, it's the worst hangover. The worst hangover in the world. And I always wonder things like that too. Like, I got this really bad hangover from wine. Is that because of my skull, or does everybody have hangovers like this? And I'm thinking, how do you feel?
Oh, today?
Yeah.
After last night, I actually feel half a beer in. So
Yeah.
No, but I agree. Like, I think of things like that, and the way. Like certain headaches, I have a problem with tension headaches. I have the stress and things. But then when you talk about the possibility of that brain stem being a little bit lower, and I'm like, boy, I wonder if that's it. I've wondered, I've been dealing with the headaches, kind of all my life, and it's one of those things. I've gone back and looked at a lot of my medical records because I went through different things as a kid, and I constantly wonder. I'm like, are these things related to that surgery?
Yeah.
Do I get more headaches than a normal person because of that? Is there something, because of how my skull is at this point and how it affects things? And I don't know. And I don't know who I could even ask,
Yeah.
That was the question I had. Trevor, you found the book, but is there a Facebook page? Like, are there groups out there? Like, where do you go?
Well, that's the amazing thing that I also saw that, Kase really did a good job of talking about the support groups that are out there, because it's one of those necessary things, and they usually form out of necessity. Somebody that's in it says, I need to help other people, and so you got the Cranio Kids, and there are Facebook pages and things like that. But you have some, you have personal knowledge of these people, so I think you should kind of.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of it too. Is like when we talk about our moms, they didn't have that. They were out there. They didn't think any other kid had this, and they had family. Oh, luckily, like my mom always says, my dad was at Iraq, and then she apologizes for being emotional, but she's so strong. They had family, but nobody really understood, and again, like now, like Facebook pages, there's like 4 major ones, and there's Cranial Kids was a big deal, and Katie Mae Gardner wrote the foreword to this, and she's an amazing woman, and her son had craniosynostosis, and there was before Katie Mae, this was like probably mid 2000s, maybe even earlier, when like you could actually get like a website your own, like a MySpace or anything like that. She started Cranial Kids as a support group because she didn't know anybody else, and I originally I pitched it as Cranial Kids Release or whatever like that, and they said, they wrote back like, Cranial Kids sounds we don't like how it sounds. It sounds like an insult. And I was like, it's not. If you know the community, it's actually we're known as Cranial Kids.
Yeah.
And so she started that then, and so I wanted her to write the foreword, because she, at the heart, like, so there's multiple pages now, of support groups where their moms are on there every day, and I've been in contact. But that's the cool thing about writing a book like this, is I've talked to support groups in Australia, any of the English-speaking countries. In the UK, I'm friends with the Cranial Kids UK and Cranial Kids Ireland and Cranial Kids Australia with their directors, and that's there now, and that's something our moms didn't have, and that all, like, Katie Mae was the first one to really get a big one started, and so I had ever.
What's maybe the oldest in those groups? In other words, where do we go from here? We're in our 40s here today. You guys are, and I am too. So what do you know about the future and what it can maybe do as you age? Is there any complications into later age, or we don't know?
I don't think we know. I mean, that's why we have these questions of like, is this related to that? This feeling that I get, is that related? And that's the best thing about having the support groups, is now, you can talk to other people that are going through it. But, people our age, I don't think we talk about it that much. So, I've reached out to those groups before, and just throw myself out there and say, hey, look, I had surgery in 72. And here's the things that I've done in my life and feel pretty accomplished. Yeah. And I get the responses from the parents. They're like, oh my God, I really needed to hear that. Yeah. And it's incredible. And so to have a book like this.
Well, this documentary, I think, will be really good for that.
That's the hope. I mean,
it's like, really good for that. And the thing is, there's nobody studying it. Before us, I mean, when late 60s, early 70s, this surgery actually started to become commonplace. But there's nobody tracking that group before us. There's nobody tracking us.
Yeah.
There's no long-term studies tracking Trevor and I. Not that we know of. We could be Truman showing this. But,
right. Exactly. Yeah.
But there's no long-term. There's no tracking of it. Like there's really no major studies on kids who are not corrected, because at our age, they started to just basically say this needs to be corrected. So our generation is.
Because if there were maybe lifespans attached to corrected versus non-corrected, maybe the voluntary thing, verbiage may disappear a little bit.
Yeah.
It's an excellent point. Mm-hmm. Like it could change the way that this is looked at. Yeah. If somebody was actually doing studies. And it's kind of fascinating, because if you think about it, like, we were kids that had essentially, brain surgery, and no one bothered to track that. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you got a transplant surgery or anything, that was kind of things that were happening around that same time. That was big news, and things were tracked, and you always knew, and you knew the first person that had a heart transplant and things like that. But I don't know that anybody ever followed up a single thing with me.
Yeah. No, and that's a really interesting part too, is that we talk about our parents and our moms, and once, I think with our family, it's kind of like, once we were doing okay, and they didn't. It was not a worry anymore, and that's probably a negative effect of social media now, is that now you get on Google and you can get on Facebook and you can stress, you can worry, and then you find out about that person in the UK who's 5 and having a hard time after correction, where the other 99% are doing just fine. So these moms find out about that one kid because they're the ones that are going to be vocal, the ones who are having the problems, and so then they start to spin and they worry. With our moms, that's a benefit of the fact that there wasn't. Our doctor, sure. I had the little book. I still have the little book where at my 3-month checkup, my pediatrician said, looks good, all normal. And after that, never talked about my skull. And it kind of blows your mind. They really opened up our skulls when we were babies. And they took out some skull. Yeah. Put in some.
Took out some skull. Hey.
Put in some alien kind of.
Something that dissolves.
And obviously makes us bald and short. And it's like,
right.
But
that was actually one of the things when I met you in person. I'm like, oh, he's about my height. Yeah. I wonder if that's something. I know.
Yeah.
So
also blessed with good senses of humor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe that's part of it.
But that's the other part, they get on social media now and they hear about a kid who had a problem. It may or may not be directly related to craniosynostosis.
Yeah.
And then the moms are all of a sudden, parents are worried about, well, is this going to happen to my kid? Where we get the little, Dr. Way signed off saying, looks good 3 months after surgery. And my mom let me play football, and they did, all these things. And I think that's different. That says, that could be a whole book about our change in society and the way that we view parenting and the way we are as people, compared to 40 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
That's a huge thing.
Yeah.
My parents were like, go play football.
Yeah.
Did you guys play sports like that? Like contact sports?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. My pediatrician told me not to play football, but it was because I was small. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, screw you. I'm playing. It was actually one of my baseball coaches, and I didn't know that we had like a pee-wee football league in my little town. And he's like, man, you should play football. And I'm like, oh, that sounds great. And so my mom took me to the pediatrician, and this is a pediatrician that we had moved since Milwaukee at that point. And so, we probably never even brought up, that surgery was always on my medical chart, but it was not like a thing, and so he certainly wasn't judging anything based on that. It was just like, well, you're kind of small, maybe you shouldn't do that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm doing it, and I played up until high school, and then, I was way outsized, so I'm like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't get beat up so much anymore. I'm gonna go hang out with the guys under the bleachers and have a beer or during the game instead. But.
Well, it's funny with football is because my dad's a big guy. I don't know what happened to my brother. Well, my mom's 4'9".
Really?
No, 5 foot. She's 5 foot. She's little. 4'9" is pretty small.
My dad is 6'2".
Yeah.
My brother is 6 foot. I'm 5'4". My mom was 4'10".
Yeah. See, my dad's 6'2", shoulders this wide. I mean, he's a brick.
Yeah.
My brother's 5'5". I'm 5'6". One kid should get the 6 foot. Right? No, for football, I think I have some lingering things from football because I think I got a concussion once, but it wasn't because of cranial.
Right. I know I got a concussion in Pee Wee. I remember getting knocked out once.
Yeah, me too. And I played football all the way through till high school, and they actually, I played rec, and Judge Memorial said, because I was going to Catholic school here, they're like, you should come down and play for Judge, and I said. But then I blew my knee out. The reason I stopped playing football is because I tore my ACL in 9th grade. And so I stopped playing football because I was speedy and I could catch the football. So I was doing all right.
Maybe that's something.
Yeah.
I was a receiver and a defensive
there
back. I could catch anything.
And I could tackle.
There you go. Yeah.
So I quit because of my ACL, not because of that. Because I think this says a lot about society too. And that's the thing about craniosynostosis too, is once our skulls shored themselves up, they were skulls.
Yeah.
Luckily, I feel like, again, we're pretty lucky.
Oh, yeah.
We're leading these lives, and there are more of us out there. They're out there wandering around,
It is actually a thing in the back of my head, though, if, I snowboarded for a while, and I, fell in the back of my head, and I wonder, am I more susceptible to, something bad happening with my skull with a hard fall, because... Mm-hmm. But probably not, I guess, because everybody has...
Or less.
Or less.
Well, I mean,
who knows?
We were born with thick skulls.
Yeah, it's true. In more than one way.
I know,
That's
it's
the truth.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, I was born with way too much bone in my skull, and we laugh, and I like to laugh about it, mainly because for those moms.
Yeah.
They're so worried. They're so worried. And you can get them on Facebook. And I had to pull away from those Facebook groups for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I'm kind of going back in because we're going to do a documentary and stuff,
Yeah. I go through cycles of it. Yeah.
But you have to pull out. And for me too, I'm writing these novels and I'm hoping to know, like for a while I was like, I don't want to be the guy who wrote the Skull book. I want to be known as somebody who writes really good novels.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like trying to redefine ourselves.
Yeah.
As not a cranio kid your whole life.
Yeah.
And that's hard, but you're always, it's weird. And it's like, you wouldn't even know. Like when we first met, it's like, you had no clue.
I had no clue.
Yeah. And most people don't. And it's like, nobody knows and they don't need to know. And I wrote the book because somebody needs to know.
Yeah.
Those moms need to know and those dads need to know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
We don't.
I needed to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like when you reached out to me, I was like, oh, this is cool. Somebody else my own age. I've never met one.
Me either.
So, but they're out there. I always look at people.
Yeah.
It's kind of beautiful.
Isn't it though?
Right? And this little whole lager, which isn't bad. It's okay. I didn't know Vernal had a brewery.
I'd never heard of it before in my life.
It's kind of
How you found it?
Yeah.
It was in
store?
Smith's. Yeah, which means it's 3.2% or 2.8% or whatever it is. We're just drinking. We're just rehydrating.
It's not much at all.
But we're an hour and 25 in for one beer.
That's true. We are pretty good.
Yeah, I know. Because we're talking so much. Yeah. I guess that's what you have to do during a podcast.
Yeah. Well, Brandon usually cuts us off at 45 minutes.
Well, I was kind of wondering. I'm like, how long should we talk? Because we could talk
I wanted
more.
you guys
but we'll talk more.
Yeah.
to talk until you felt comfortable.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think one thing though, because since I am the host,
yes, of course,
and this is your opportunity to be the guest and talk about your writing, we need to stop talking about this book and tell me about some of your other writings, especially what's going on. Because
I'm in different phases of different things. I've got about 3 or 4 essays that I'm always publishing essays just because it's kind of my bread and butter.
And he's good at it.
And I can do it. Yeah, I've gotten to a point where I can do it pretty well and sell a good 1,500 word essay pretty easily, and they sell for good money and so on and so forth.
Wow!
And so you can kick those. I kick about 4 or 5 of those out a year just to stay fresh with that. But I'm always writing novels for the last 5 years.
Where does an essay go? That's something as a writer myself. I don't even know some of the avenues because I'm so TV focused.
Right? Yeah.
You
Well, I've changed gear. Up until like 2 years ago, I was publishing in literary journals because I was really looking. I was in academia.
Yeah.
And now I'm not. I'm really going away from academia. I've made the official decision. Like I'm going to go away from academia. I'm sick of it. I'm going to move away from academia. So now in the last 2 years, I've started to send them to places like. I had 3 pieces out last year. One for Like the Wind magazine, which is a stellar running magazine out of the UK. And then Southwest magazine. So like.
Yeah.
And then just recently Full Grown People, which is an online zine, which I love, but it's about middle-aged people and the things that we're dealing with. And I'm working on a piece now. So I've started to send to places that people actually read and that actually pay. So I'm making a shift away.
There you go.
Because literary journals.
That's a good move, I'd say. So being read and getting paid. And those are, probably good things.
I know, right? Literary journals, like the only people who read them are the people who are in them. 12 people are in this issue. Well, 12 people will read it, because nobody knows. And so I've really liked the shift. And I've been successful at it. But here's the key. Like I've always written very literary for literary journals, right?
Sure.
Very upmarket. But I'm not changing my style. So I've shifted to like these running magazines in Southwest, and I'm still writing literary essays.
Yeah.
And they're still paying me for it. So I'm like, I should have been doing this the last 10 years of my life. I thought I had to go to like writing listicles and and I'm like, I'm just writing essays still. And so that's where I'm really moving the the pay side of the writing beyond teaching, right? That keeps me going. Keeps paying mortgage.
Sure. Nice house, by the way.
Oh yeah, well that's mostly my wife. But like if we sectioned off what I pay, percentage wise, right. She's got her own office. But then when it comes to literary stuff, I'm writing novels. I am into novels, and with this book, it took so much out of me, mainly because I had to interview the people and then I had to listen to their stories again and then write. And it was like I went through these heartbreaking moments 3 or 4 times to get their stories out there. Because this book is probably 20%, 25% about me, 25%, 30% about medical history, and then the rest of it is about other people in narrative. So I interviewed people and did things in third person. So it felt like stories. So it felt like memoir. And I think I did a pretty good job at that. But it took so much out of me. Yeah. And so now novels, I love novels. And we're in different, you can't officially talk about where your novel is on record.
Yeah.
Because it's like a industry, what's the word? Industry faux pas? No, industry. So we can talk about that offline. Yeah. But I'm writing novels now, and I love writing novels. And I think hopefully we'll get one out soon.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you kind of touch on it too. Like, what's the difference between writing something like this and writing a novel? Like,
yeah, this is creative nonfiction. Like this it's hard. You know, I mean, I wish I had a better word for it, but it's hard.
But what about novels now?
Fun. Oh my gosh, I get to wake up and create stuff. You know, it's like, and all my novels are basically nonfiction. You know, I'm just like, but it's true. You know? You pop up in one. It's not you,
right?
You know, it's not.
Nope,
it's not Brandon. It's Brendan. You know,
right.
But I love novels. Is just like it's creating a world, you know, and you just you get to live in it for a year, and it's cool. And I have an amazing agent. She's just, I hear horror stories about agents, and she is spectacular, you know. And so I'm really, really lucky that way. I hope she never drops me, you know. But she's really, really, really supportive.
We all know you here on the Literally podcast, but we're hoping that this podcast does open up some more venues or more people listening. Where can they follow your work, Kase?
You can go to casejohnston.com. It's not a
that's a good website for
there's
you.
Only there's only one me with that first name and with the UN on Johnston. There's only one Kase Johnstun in the world.
Again,
there's
only one Trevor Baierl in the world.
Yeah, see?
Boom. There's a lot of connections. And I will say that if there's another one, like Highlander, there can only be one, and I will kill you.
You're done.
Yeah.
I'll meet you on top of a Spanish, of a broken down Spanish castle.
Exactly. I will take you out.
Yes. And then, of course, the Literally podcast is at Banyan Collective /Literally.
Yeah, and search Literally on iTunes if you're not.
Literally on iTunes now, yeah.
So you should literally search Literally.
Yeah.
Pops right up.
And that name came up. Like, we were like, we should call it Literally. We were joking.
Yeah.
Lit. Early, and then we were like, then we tried to come up with better names. We're like, we got nothing else here, you know.
Hey, when you get it, you got it. And
my most recent piece on full-grown people has done really, really well. Like the Southwest, like you see me in the seat back pockets of your Southwest article. And I'm right now pitching an essay about Sundance, where I got to interview filmmakers.
Nice.
It was really cool. Megan Griffiths, who they want to do Batgirl, did one of the small ones. This was like a love letter to Seattle, and they did 4 shorts. She did fiction, and then Dave Grohl did one, and then a couple other guys, and got to interview them at Sundance. And so I'm putting together a piece about that because we lived in Seattle for quite a while. That's where this book Lucas was born in the Seattle area.
Oh, okay.
And so we got to have a long conversation with them. But again, it's just an essay about me. You know, it's
hey, write about what you know. That's what it is.
An essay about their films got in there a little bit, but how they pertain to me, you know. So that's currently on submission. I think I may have a bite on that. So yeah.
Trevor, do you want to talk about anything what you're doing or where we can find you? Your work?
Well, the nice thing is I am the only Trevor Baierl out there, so I'm very easily Googleable, whatever that is, if you can spell my last name, Baierl. I mean, what kind of brought me to this point is I did do another medical documentary, which doesn't get watched by a lot of people and doesn't make me any money, which is,
like that book.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel that. So the money I do make, I do reality TV. So a new show, and I wish I had a title at this point and I could say it, but new Discovery series that's coming out. We air after Deadliest Catch. starting April 10th.
I hear that show's catching on.
Some people watch that show. Yeah. So we haven't even been announced yet, so I'm actually probably breaking some rules by mentioning it, but whatever. It's Facebook Live. I can do what I want. And a podcast.
Yeah.
And a soon-to-be documentary, or at least a short or a start or many things. But that's it. That's the thing. That's what brought me here. Is I have these weird medical things that I've been dealing with in my family and my life, and finding out that there's not enough information out there about it, and then finding the people that I can talk to about it. And it's like, let's put that on some tape and get it out so other people can understand and not be in the situation that we were in. Let's help some people. So that's the hope for this. I might do another one after this, and this is a thing that I don't know if is connected, but I actually stopped. We could be talking for hours about this stuff, but I actually stopped growing when I was 2 years old. And, it's one of those things that, was it connected, was it not? And I went on growth hormone therapy, and, things changed, and I was projected to be 5'7", and I didn't make it. And I want to know who I can contact about that. I want some answers. I want some sort of compensation. But so
that's really interesting.
Yeah,
that might be connected.
It might be. I don't know. I had my surgery at 13 months, so who knows? It could have affected some of my brain development and things like that. But on the flip side, and this is the thing that I like to tell the families is, look, and I will brag about myself a little bit. I did really well in school. I got an academic scholarship to Pepperdine, graduated, got out of there. I've been in TV and film for, 25 plus years. I'm Emmy-Nominated in the, unscripted, unstructured reality program, I've done pretty well. Nothing has held me back, so it just goes to say, it's not a choice, do it and then live the best life you can, because that's what it's really about. And share your stories,
Absolutely.
Everybody's got a story, at least one. Some of us are lucky to have multiple, and we can keep sharing and actually make money and make a living doing it, because that's the best thing about writing. Because writing sucks. Yeah. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But in the end, if you can make a living out of it, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So that's what's cool. This is a literary podcast, so
it is.
Let's tie it back to writing. Because
Yeah, on behalf of the Banning Collective, I just want to say thanks to both of you two gentlemen for being open and joining us today. I think it's awesome.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah,
Again,
appreciate
and
it.
always.
How much do I get paid for hosting this?
Another beer.
Sweet. I'll take it. I'll take it.
All right, thank you for listening to this podcast. This episode of Literally is sponsored by Lexicon and Line. Kase, tell us a little something about Lexicon and Line.
Lexicon and Line, it does three things. They are communications consultants. They teach professional business writing and speaking courses, and they are research and data evaluation experts.
And you can find everything about Lexicon and Line at lexicononline.com. Please give them a visit, and thank you so much for sponsoring this podcast, Lexicon and Line.